Let's break down the long-awaited CX9 SMG. We waited months for the CX9, and now that it's here, does it live up to its expectations? The CX9 we have now is a bit different than the one we had a few months ago. The damage values are a bit different, but all the other mobility stats and recoil seem to be just about the same. But as always, before we get into the stats, let's talk about the build. In the build, we're using the CX38S barrel since it's basically a monolithic integral suppressor, the GI Mini Reflex or an optic of your choice, the 50 round drums, the CX9 tack grip, although if you don't want a good sprint to fire, you can definitely use the more skeleton style stock, and lastly, sleight of hand. This build is very well rounded, meaning it would be an excellent choice for a sniper support weapon. So let's get into the stats, starting with mobility. Its ADS time isn't that great at 250 milliseconds for an SMG, but it will be beating many other long-range SMGs. Its reload and reload add times are 1.58 and 1.27 seconds, so you don't actually have to worry about saving one bullet in the mag. And its mag is 50, so you will be reloading quite a lot. Its movement speed is pretty good for Modern Warfare weapons, but against Cold War weapons, it's just not enough. And while its sprint speed is above average when compared to basically every weapon, when compared specifically against Cold War SMGs, it's about 90 or 80 meters per minute less than those, so it just really cannot compete. Its ADS strafe speed though is 2.52 meters per second, which is actually really good. And its sprint out and tac sprint out times are 130 and 180, which are really competitive. Its stability is 2T, which isn't that great, but you won't be stretching the ranges that far with this anyways. Its bullet velocity is pretty decent for an SMG, but when compared to the PPSh or the MP7 or the LC10, it's not quite there. But its rate of fire is an absolutely amazing 17.3 rounds per second, or 1038 rounds per minute. So it gets a mobility score of 39. Its recoil is reasonably manageable. It goes up and to the right. Its first 30 bullets rise quite a lot, but the last 20 are grouped very closely. It doesn't have that much side-to-side bounce, so you can easily use this up to 45 meters and 50 if you can really control the recoil. So it gets a recoil score of 32. Now its damage. It has a drop-off point at 18 meters and another one at 31. Under 18 meters, it is pretty competitive when compared to other long-range SMGs and even compared to other closer-range SMGs. Between 18 and 31 meters though, it's not really going to be beating any assault rifles, which kind of sucks when you want to use this as a sniper support weapon. But its high rate of fire does mean you'll be making the enemy flinch a lot. However, when compared to other SMGs, it will beat pretty much all of them. There's very little that can beat this TTK, but remember, you have to be hitting all your shots in order to get that TTK. Another SMG with a lower rate of fire, but that requires less shots to kill, if they hit all their shots and you miss one, they will win. And after 31 meters, it is still pretty average, but that means it'll be beating all the SMGs, many closer range assault rifles, and it'll still remain relevant when compared to other long range assault rifles too. However, because this is an SMG, and it requires a lot of shots to hit, you're probably not going to be using this past 31 meters. You're definitely going to be wanting to swap to your sniper rifle or your long range assault rifle. So it gets a damage score of 45.09. And when we add up all the categories, it gets a final score of 116.09. This score is pretty decent for an SMG, but when compared against something like the MP7 and the PPSh, it doesn't really have that good of a score. It has the same recoil as the PPSh, but its damage is lower than both the PPSh and the MP7s. And its movement and sprint speeds, I wish they were much higher because this isn't really competitive for an SMG. If you pair the CX9 with a Cold War long-range assault rifle or the Swiss K31, you're actually going to want to run around the map with those ones instead of the CX9, since their movement speeds are much faster and their sprint speeds just blow it out of the water. This seems pretty counterintuitive because it's normally the other way around. Instead of swapping to your long-range weapon when you see a target far away, you're going to have to swap to your close-range weapon when you start getting near buildings, and this will slow you down. And if something pops out of nowhere and you're not prepared for it, by the time you swap, you may be dead. So what is the best way to run the CX9? Well, I've kind of already said it, but it's best used as a sniper support weapon or like your typical pairing with a long-range assault rifle. Since it's lacking in movement and sprint speed, I kind of want to pair it more with a long-range assault rifle since you can technically use a long-range assault rifle all the way down to 20-ish meters or less if you have a low zoom scope or a high FOV. But at that point, you may as well just use an SMG that is better at close range and just work on closing the distance. However, I do gotta say, when it's used the way it's supposed to be used, as a longer range SMG, it really works well. Since it's an SMG, its FOV multiplier is a lot lower than an assault rifle, so you'll be able to track targets at close range. And while this makes it harder to see targets at further ranges, since it has such little recoil and very little bounce, you can just track those long range targets easily as well. So if they were to just buff its movement and sprint speeds, this SMG would be absolutely great, and it would fit well when compared to the other long range SMGs. So I definitely recommend that you try out the CX9, even though it does have a lower movement and sprint speed. But actually, if you don't run your Cold War SMGs with Tiger Team Spotlights or the Bruiser grips, then you may not actually notice the penalty and movement and sprint speed that it has, and it may be perfect for you. Remember, I always compare these weapons with their optimized counterparts, never the guns by themselves. So if you run more niche loadouts, some of this advice may not entirely apply to you. But that's the CX9. Have you unlocked it yet? And if so, what do you think? And if there's any weapon, build, or part of the game you want me to break down, let me know, and you may see it on the next Community Wednesday. So that's the video. If you enjoyed it or it's helped you in any way, let me know by leaving a like. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section down below. And if you want to make sure that you never miss another video, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.